So you want to build the budget bike and you don't know where to start? Well, you come to the right place. So thanks for watching D2 Wrenchworks and DIY. Today's video, I have a excellent hand-picked component set out. You could find this pretty much anywhere online. It is on a very good budget, and most importantly, it is constructed of modern componentry. We want to have STI shifters at least for the bare minimum. Whether you're an experienced rider or you're brand new, this is the best way to start if you ask me. And we also want to make sure we have a very nice foundation of a frame. If you keep a keen eye out and you find the bike that was actually complete like I did with this one, you can actually take parts off as you strip it down to a bare frame and make a little money for your future mods. So let's get into it. First things first, I want to start with, we have a 1992 Trek 400. This really is the star of the build. I love a budget steel road bike. I've done multiple of them, basically kind of reviews, and I add on little bonuses. But this one, being a ground up build, much more fun. You get a little bit more things to choose from, and this was already kind of like a bike kitchen build, I would say. It had some very odd things on it, but it's the main reason I bought it. You can find these almost anywhere for about 150 bucks complete. So this is an excellent start for you. And it is a very nice steel frame that is a super underdog in the tubing department. This is True Temper, made in the USA by True Temper, RC2 tubing. And on the actual scale, there's a frame website. If you wanted to look this up, I have the picture here. But you can see this mechanically, strength and all of this compares almost identical to Reynolds 525. So even though this is in 1992 advertised as actually the only steel frame road bike, kind of surprising back then, this is the only one, it was also advertised as mainly their lower end. It literally was the lowest one that you could get, but that was only really because it came with a very bad Suntour Blaze group set. Pretty much unknown. You never even see it. There's nothing that was left on this bike from there. It's kind of why I thought maybe it was like somebody donated to a bike kitchen and they stripped it down. But one of the nice things, I was able to basically pay $122 off already just by selling two of the parts that were on there. You will often find, because the Suntour parts were so bad on these, almost always they're 105 or Shimano 600, which is Ultegra. You'll find these parts on there, and they're worth a pretty penny. Even, the shifters are worth $40 or $50, 7 or 8 speed. I had Shimano 600 ones on there, so that was pretty nice. Those sold for about $50 or so, and it had, for some reason, 8-speed Sora cranks on there. And even though they were long, those still brought a pretty good one because they were triple, so those are a little harder to find, worth a little more. So I digress, you understand. Slowly and patiently, find something that has good parts on it, and then you could profit from that, quite literally, and also in your future build, as I did here. We will now get into that because this is some really great stuff. I love the micro shift shifters. I use them on all of my budget builds. It's been pretty hard since the beginning of COVID, which was obviously 2020. So over 3 years now, it's hard to find stuff on eBay on budget anymore. eBay's also raised their prices a ton, which has made it even harder to find deals because no one has to sell anything cheap. So these are awesome. You could find these anywhere. 9-speed ones are around 60, 70. So they do get a little more expensive for the more modern 9-speed. But if you only want a 7 or an 8-speed, these are $53, $55. They go up and down somewhere around there, but always around 50 bucks. Great deal. Very nice to have the modern shifting, compatible with Shimano everything. Very smooth shifting, good braking. It's got separate up and down shifters too. No having to use a brake lever to actually sweep it like on the Shimanos. So if some people are confused by the Shimanos, they don't really like having to move the brake lever, this is a great option. Next, my second favorite thing. These are basically Tektro copies. They're dual pivot, black aluminum. They actually go great with all this build. I ended up kind of piecing this together. Kind of thought it'd be really good to match the black with the white frame, so it came out perfect for that. These are about the same weight as the Tektros. They're the microphone's probably picking that up. They're very snappy, so some good strong stops. I would just make sure, because part of the things you want to make sure when you pay for stuff on a budget, they're about 25, 30 bucks. You want to make sure that you have all your hardware here and make sure that all your nuts are pretty good and tight and your brake washers are all there, because I kind of got these in a big jumbly mess, and I had to actually sort everything out myself. But that's just how it is on Amazon sometimes. So no big deal on that. Moving on over to this side, we have a very nice budget crank set, also under 30 bucks. This is a Vuelta, I don't know how you would actually enunciate that, Corsa, which is just basically a aluminum 3-piece crank set. Honestly, this is really all you need. You don't need anything super fancy or crazy expensive. This has some pretty good hardware on here. The rings seem like they're steel, which is going to add a little bit of weight, but it will make them extremely durable, and they will last a really long time. You can get them in 50-34, but these are 53-39. I want to get whoever has this the ability to have a full size. This is a size 55, so it'll probably be a bigger rider. So it kept with the normal size road ratio. So we will need a bottom bracket for our crank set. And this is just basically your standard. Shimano sells almost an identical copy of this. You can see there's an outside steel bearing right here. About 20 bucks, $17.99 plus tax. Great addition to this. Now we should move around to our cockpit. What we will just be doing is the stock SR Sakai handlebars. And I do want to focus on comfort for a build like this. So we will be using the threadless stem and a threadless stem conversion adapter. And this will give us the ability to put it wherever you would like it. Basically, wherever you find your stem length should be in your angle. But it's a nice lightweight aluminum piece, so you could literally use anything. Do not want to forget when we are moving our shifters, because this was a frame shifter bike, as I just said, we sold them. We need a place for our cables to stop, quite literally. They come down and stop here, and that's how you adjust your tension. So you will need a set of Shimano cable stops. These are about $20. They are a little expensive, but having the ability to have brand new springs and everything right in here, it makes quite a bit of a difference. I've tried to save a buck before on used ones, and if the springs are bad or if they're really rusty, it's easy for them to vibrate loose, and they'll lose tension. It'll be a huge nightmare trying to keep the bike in tune. It's really not worth it for $20. So invest in these, and they even come with a nice new little bolt I just used there. All right, one thing I did want to mention before I got too deep into this build, a few attributes about this RC2 tubing. One of the very nice things about the very svelte and tapered tubing on the chain stays here, and also the seat stays are very thin, not much bigger than a Sharpie marker. So this gives you a ton of space here for your rear tire. You could fit easily a 28C. So that plus a steel frame, you're riding on a cloud already. I mean, you can't really do much better than that on a budget, and that's pretty much a fact. If you were thinking about aluminum, I do have 4 back-to-back videos I did all throughout April and May that you can check out, multiple aluminum frames as well. So if you wanted to think of other ones, you could check those out. But for sure, this is an excellent steel frame one end. Really, if you look up the True Temper RC2, you don't see much information about it. It's a very, very unknown and definitely a hidden bike gem for sure, without a doubt. Some very cool things about this, though. I like that it has, if you do buy this as a fair frame, you always want to check, by the way, the integrated rear derailleur hanger. Make sure they're not bent too badly. A shop can always bend the steel ones back, no problem. But, you know, if it is messed up, you can't ever replace it. But the dropouts are very cool. It has awesome lug work all across the frame. Even it has like this little tip here for the seat tube. You can see down to the actual seat stays here. It has even Trek embossed in multiple parts on the frame. It's just very, very cool. Not stuff that you see very often. Very high quality framesmanship, I guess you would call it. High quality build work. Another embossed logo right there. Very cool framework along here. It just looks very nice on the lugs. We also have a sloped crown on our fork as well, which our fork is also just as the same as the rest of the frame. 4130 chromoly. And this is seamless tubing, which is going to make it about 7% stronger because it is also heat treated as well. So this is what makes up the RC2 tubing and why I think it's such a great bike. You can actually see these a lot because I guess they must have sold a ton of them, being they're cheaper, like get you into a bike kind of road bike, but something you can't really pass if you see it. For our drivetrain, to complete the rest of it, you have the option of completing you can make it a complete matching group set of the microstrip shifters. The front derailleur I used on a Volano bike off of Amazon I reviewed and I built up. This will not fit this. It comes with, it's a 34.9. It comes with a 31.8 spacer. but this is a 28.6. So I will use instead this 28.6 Exhaust 400EX front derailleur. These are pretty much Niagara level. Also kind of a hidden bike gem, to tell you the truth. Exhaust is pretty good stuff. It doesn't really get much love, but I do like it a lot because it's pretty much dirt cheap. Anywhere you look on eBay and stuff, all this stuff is very, very cheap. And it works super well on 7 and 8 speed, 6 speed vintage bike builds. So this will work on our front derailleur, on our frame here, so that's where we will be putting that. And I also have the matching rear derailleur, which is identical weight, surprisingly, as old as this is, to this brand new R8 microshift rear derailleur. The excellent thing about this is that this is under $20, so huge bonus there. This is almost 277 grams. This is, I think, 273 grams. So it really, you don't have one of these like me sitting around. Luckily, this came off another bike, so I have some parts. But this is an excellent buy for the money, and the two of them compare almost identical to the newer generation 9-speed Niagara, which had a huge overhaul because the first generation Niagara was not very good. So when you compare them, you can see the picture here. It's very nice looking. It's very high end. It's very good to have these two compared to them on such a dirt cheap budget. That is for sure. All right, with that said, we have blabbed enough about this build and how to do it. Let's put it all together, and I'll go over a few things that I like to do for the finishing touches.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Someone call the doctor. This thing is sick. You always get an idea of what something's going to look like when you start to budget it out and you get all the parts in a bin and it gets bigger and you're like, okay, here's the frame, here's the parts, I'm getting an idea. But man, and I've done tons of videos, I've done tons of other bikes I've never even got a video on, but sometimes you really surprise yourself with how nice something comes together. I'm not really a huge fan of white frame bikes, but something about the red lettering, and I got this bike with this Cloud C9 saddle on it. It's like a gel comfort road saddle. Doesn't look too bad, but I like the black and red coloring and also the tires that were also on it. And I really wanted to just go with that vibe. And I wanted to build it pretty much to what its name was supposed to be. A competitive sporting road bike, something you commute in, or you could go and do amateur style racing. You're not going to go do the Tour de France in this thing. You're not going to be a pro racer in this, but it is on a budget, and it is going to be super smooth, first of all. Let's do a good versus bad, actually, before I get too far into it, because there are some bad. So we'll do the bad first. First things worst, the crank. It is a great crank on a budget, and honestly, it's kind of unheard of to think $30 for a brand new crank shipped to your door. When I got started, that was literally unheard of. And I mean, it's a nice thing to have the ability to change the chain rings out. That will lose you a little bit of weight if you wanted to go aluminum. But honestly, they're 1,100 grams. So they're some stout boys. They will be extremely durable. You could crash it. I'm sure there will be never, ever an issue. They're very solid. But you can lose almost 1.25 pounds just changing the cranks. And we did go budget on the bottom bracket as well. So that's a little hefty too. You won't see a huge weight penalty on the bottom bracket. But if you did change it out for a newer style Shimano Holotech, for example, or maybe a Octolink 9-speed, something to this effect, those newer axles will drop a ton of weight, even more than 1.25 pounds. So there's a big difference there. The total weight came out to being 25 pounds. So I forgot to mention, I weighed this with these big blocky BMX/commuter style pedals. These things are going to be pretty heavy. They're probably 1 pound alone. If I were to take these off, I bet you it weighs 24 and change. So keep that in mind. That is actually phenomenal because I did make a bit of a mistake in the beginning of this video saying this was a 55 centimeter. When I was working on it, it's like, man, this seemed kind of long for a 55. It's actually a 57. So for a 57, this is quite a large frame. You got a lot of steel. You got a lot of extra cabling, yada, yada, yada. It comes out to being about 25 pounds with that crank. So it's really not that bad, but it is, I guess you could say, the worst. Now, secondly, we kept a freewheel style wheel set on here because it's what came with it, as I just mentioned, the wheel and the tires and all of this. It's easy to keep it for a 7-speed like this, and honestly, it could never give you an issue as long as you keep good maintenance of it. These are nice and true, no issues with any of the nipples, no cracks. These honestly have next to no wear on the rims, so sometimes you get really, really lucky with a nice freewheel vintage wheel set. But if you're finding inside the nipple area there's cracks, I mean, these things can get beat up over time. And there's single wall technology. They can be strong, but I mean, they're only going to take so many miles like any other wheel set. Now, you could upgrade and lose a ton of weight there as well. An Alex wheel set off Craigslist for $50 would be a good budget investment. Same thing, no different than them. You're gonna have to make sure they're true and no cracks, etc. But I digress. It is not a big deal on this at all. I am very pleased with where it's at. And actually, I'm kind of surprised it ended up being a little heavier considering how big this bike was. That pretty much covers it for the bad list of things that I wasn't really too excited about. But honestly, for the money you're paying, like I said, you can't be too upset. You do also want to be leery. These brakes, I forgot to mention, are long reach. You can see the bolt is up quite high here. They will fit 99% of frames, but you might have a funky geometry and going up all the way high won't even work for you. So if you have to worry about that, get yourself some Shimano 105 vintage brakes, something like that, dirt cheap. These are around the same price, though, around $20, $25. So great investment. They work flawlessly. Paired to the microshift shifters, you get a really, really tight grip. We'll lock up the wheel on pavement, no problem. One of the really nice things that we did here, we updated our cockpit. Now we have extreme comfort. You can do whatever you want, position the handlebars up and down, angle. This makes such a huge difference versus when you're just locked into a position with an old quill stem and you can't really get any variable positions or adjustments to fit maybe you got longer arms than the last guy or something. This happens all the time. Often with the seat posts as well, you could get a slight setback like this one has, or move it up forward a little bit with a zero offset. So these are things to think about. And I did not want to forget, specifically when you go steel frames, looking at budget bikes, you'll run into stuff that people don't get a lot, like this bike. This has a 26.8 millimeter seat post, so I didn't want to forget to mention that. The True Temper 2s, True Temper RC2s use the 26.8. If you go on Sheldon Brown, they say literally every American-made steel frame bike uses 27.2. There are some exceptions. I've run into them multiple times before. Also, don't forget to check your handlebars when you're doing a build like this. For some reason, I had 38 millimeter and really, really narrow handlebars. So we put some big wide 44s on here, something I had perfect takeoff for another one. I mentioned we did the stem that paired perfectly with the bars. So that pretty much completes the whole cockpit area. Gives yourself, like I said, a next level of comfort. Get your fit right. And lastly, I know I already spoke about this earlier, the microshift group set. The shifters, I'm going to show you here just how smoothly they go together. I'm always so impressed once I get a new build together, just how nice once you get it tuned. Bing, 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 boom, 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 up and down. Super smooth, super reliable, very, very good for the money. I'm always pleased with the shifters, but this is the first time I actually put the rear derailleur on, and they paired together excellently. You imagine they're designed to do that, but for a $17 or $18 one versus a lot of the Shimano nicer ones, you never know what you're going to get. I did say I compared it to a Tiagra level, and I stick by that without a doubt. Has some really nice adjustment screws to it. Has some really nice B adjustment to it too. Sometimes these little screws are super small and you have to get them out for a bigger one if you're going to a big old freewheel like we got here. But no, everything was super smooth on this, so I'm very, very pleased with it. That pretty much concludes the build, guys. If you want to learn how to put these shifters together, I did a video on how to do the brake and shifter cables. And yeah, I loved how the bike came out. It looks awesome. Another one to add to the collection, and that's pretty much it, guys. If you want to support the channel, please do. You could find us over at Patreon. You can also find us on YouTube memberships, where we have 2 different types, and you can support us there. I'd greatly appreciate it if you did. Thanks.